he's gone. He's no longer a UFC fighter, and he's not fighting tonight.
So he's been cut from the UFC off the back of that?
Yep.
Coming up this weekend at lightweight, a fight almost 2 years in the making, the UFC's own version of Don Rickles with Toy Story. We have Mr. Potato, Ottman Azaitar, taking on Matt Frevola. It's the Steamrolla versus the Bulldozer.
Hear me out.
And yeah,
Is Matt Frevola just Jason Witt from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
I mean, I don't know about that.
It's pretty close, though. Not like down to the size of an ant, but you take 15 pounds off him, boom, we're in business.
Matt Frevola, I mean, coming in off a giant win over Renato Valdez his last time out, he looked amazing, dropped him umpteen different times. I counted 6 knockdowns, the UFC didn't, but regardless, Matt Frevola looked amazing in that fight, but we gotta reel it back in a little bit. We talked about this fight 2 years ago. I think you folks are going to enjoy this. We're going to throw it back to the breakdown.
We look different.
From 2 years ago, we look different. The studio's different. Let's throw it on back to the original breakdown, and then we'll update you with all of the particulars because a lot's different since that. 2 great fighters. One in Morocco's Ottman Azaitar. The nickname's the Bulldozer, taking on Matt, the Steamroller Frevola, out of the great old US of A. And for Matt Frevola, if he's going to set things up, really has to go with a wrestling-heavy offense. You look at his last 2 wins against primary strikers, Jalen Turner, and a really tough out in Luis Pena. And while they consider that one a split decision win, I don't know what one of the judges was thinking, because for Matt Frevola, he put on a great fight in that one. And if you look at Ottman Azaitar...
He got dropped in every round.
He got dropped, but his wrestling worked. And if you look at Ottman Azaitar, undefeated at 13-0, his 2 UFC fights, a knockout of Teemu Packalén, and Kama Worthy. And Matt, I remember our narrative going into the fight between Azaitar and Kama Worthy, the fact that Worthy throws a lot of straight shots down the middle. They could disrupt the rhythm of Ottman Azaitar, who throws with a lot of power. And he has a lot of different kind of styles to his fighting. And he's a master of sport in Thai boxing. He has great power. Obviously, we've seen that through his undefeated run. And Teemu Packalén, a win over him doesn't tell you anything. Teemu Packalén's UFC run was meager, I guess.
People know him for being on 2 different guys' highlight reels. That'd be Azaitar and Jacasey. So not really what you want to be known for in a UFC run.
It's difficult. But in this fight, very interesting. Contrasting styles meeting in the middle. For Matt Frevola coming in, he had a great win on Contender Series. He had the loss to Polo Reyes in his debut. And if you look at the overall Tapology predictions, 643 of them, 90% going Azaitar, 85% have him to win by knockout. We've seen that done. And in the Polo Reyes fight against Matt Frevola, he knocks him down with almost the first punch. And then Matt Frevola is just trying to clear the cobwebs for the rest of it, and then Polo ends it.
So Matt Frevola is a really interesting character, and you know a lot more about heavy machinery than I do. I don't really know what would win out between a Bulldozer and a Steamrolla, but Matt Frevola...
I'd take a Bulldozer, depending on the size.
Okay, perfect. So for Matt Frevola, though, he does really like to incorporate his wrestling into his game, and the wrestling is the foundation, and a lot of the time when you talk about a wrestle boxer, they use their hands to then set up their wrestling, whereas for Frevola, it feels like it's the opposite. He really needs the takedown for his stand-up to have success, because on the feet, he's very basic, and I don't mean that in a negative way. He just doesn't do a lot of crazy techniques. It's just jabs and straights, not even really a lot of kicking game either. Just, I know what I'm good at, and I'm going to stick to that. Over at Ottman Azaitar, though, I don't think I've ever been more impressed. I can't say that. That's such a huge statement. I've definitely been more impressed in my life, but Azaitar's just run in the UFC to this point has been very impressive. And
2 fights.
2 fights, I know, but you can't have 2
Teemu
fights
Packalén
and look any better. And yes, we talk about people's opponents. It matters how you beat them, though. And the fact that he was able to go out there and just start you with 1 punch was very impressive. The Kama Worthy fight is interesting because I was never that high on Kama Worthy until the Ottman Azaitar fight. And I was like, damn, Kama Worthy at 155, he's durable, he's got good boxing, switch stances, like, wow, what isn't there to like about him? And then Ottman Azaitar, I don't know if his one goal that day was to prove me wrong, but boy did he. His boxing is absurd, and it's not just the boxing technique, it's not just the Muay Thai. His hand speed is something that cannot be undermined. He's got phenomenal strikes. He goes to the body, too. And it's something that we saw a lot in the Holloway.
If you watch that finish in the Kama Worthy fight, he rocks him, and then when Worthy goes back, he goes almost like Max Holloway in the fight against Calvin Kattar, just straight up to the body until Worthy kind of drops down, and then he starts going to the head again.
It's very Ilia Topuria-esque when you look back at just sort of recent finishes in that aspect. He's not a guy... We don't see it a lot in MMA. Left hooks to the body are really good. Stipe Miocic proved that against Daniel Cormier. And the people who use them, like the really high-level boxing in MMA, they always have great success. Azaitar is one of those guys who, he might not have a number next to his name, but some of the skills that he shows kind of prove that he will be at that point. At one point in his career, I can almost guarantee you Ottman Azaitar will be ranked. That's the high regard I hold him in. I like how active his hips are too. We talk about that a lot when we talk about Petr Yan. But with Yan, he might not be the best grappler in the world, just when you look at it credentials-wise. But in MMA, the fact that the second you even think about a takedown on Yan, his hips are either down or they're away. He's not going to play around with that range a lot with you. Frevola, basically, like, that's all he wants to do. So for Azaitar, if he can keep his back off the cage and just really force this fight, I'm not even going to say disengage in the wrestling completely. It's definitely not the best idea, but if he is involved in some wrestling transitions, I wouldn't worry that much about it. I would just really need to make sure that Azaitar can hold the center of the cage. If he's not getting backed up to the cage where Frevola can... And Frevola won't even be getting a lot of takedowns from the cage. It's sort of the frustrating thing about his style. It's, I'm going to take you down, then you're going to work your way back up to your feet, then I'll trip you again, and it's just sort of... It's a style that's going to break your will more than any of your bones. And for Azaitar, the exact opposite. Like, he's going out there to finish you, where for Frevola, he's going out there to win.
Alright, so we reel it back in, Matt. New studio, different look. Same guys, though, but you focus in on this fight. So, Azaitar out due to Potato Gate. In steps Arman Tsarukyan? Because Tsarukyan was supposed to fight Nasrat Haqparast on that card. Haqparast out, Azaitar out. It's like a fight like on the regional scene. They just throw guys together. Frevola fights Arman Tsarukyan. Frevola in that fight, plus 480 as a dog. Wow. Lost that fight, got ground out. No shame in that one. Then he goes out there and fights Terrence McKinney. He was a minus 205 favorite in that one. We picked him to win that fight. McKinney knocked him out in 10 seconds. So then Frevola goes out and fights Renato Valdez. Knocks him dead about 8.5 months ago. Looked amazing in that fight. I have to say this, though. He looked amazing in that fight. I don't take anything away from him. I don't think Renato Valdez is a UFC fighter. My question to you, Matt. Ottman Azaitar hasn't competed since he beat Worthy years ago. But the point is, have you gained much from Matt Frevola losing to McKinney, losing to Tsarukyan, beating Renato Valdez in that time span where Azaitar has been away?
Not a lot, I don't think, because I do feel like his skill set still is the same if you look at the foundation of it. His striking is still somewhat basic. I don't
know. I think he was a banshee his last time out.
Against a guy who you admittedly said was not at the UFC level. You're right, he did look better, but you have to understand who he looked better against. Like, Kevin Durant just broke Daniel Gafford's ankles. It's not like he broke Mikhail Bridges' ankles. Like, there's levels to this. For Matt Frevola, you're right. He did look like his striking was better, but it takes a lot more than against a guy like Valdez for me to really buy into those improvements that you have made on the feet. I think Frevola is, what I said at the start of the video, he does share some similarities with a guy like Jason Witt. You're going to worry about him when he fights a genuine power puncher because we have seen him struggle with real power threats on the feet, especially at the UFC level.
And in the UFC for Frevola, dropped twice by Polo Reyes, dropped twice by Lando Venata, and dropped by Terrence McKinney
I feel like he got hurt by Luis Pena too. I don't know if he got dropped by him, but he was definitely hurt on multiple occasions. My point with Frevola is, he just has very obvious strengths and very obvious weaknesses. His striking is effective, but still somewhat basic. He has a very good wrestling game, and I do like his wrestling cardio too, because I do think you have to split cardio into two different factions. You have striking cardio and wrestling cardio. Look at a guy like Israel Adesanya. He has great cardio if he can keep the fight on the feet because he's used those muscles so often. But then look at him in the fight against Jan Blachowicz when he's defending takedowns, trying to get up from the bottom. He is starting to wear the fatigue on him much more than when he is able to fight at his own pace. And for Matt Frevola, when he's getting into those wrestling heavy exchanges, he can look good pretty late, even if he is fighting at a very high pace. And that's the one thing I've always really liked out of Frevola. But against a guy like Azaitar, who does throw with such heavy power in his feet, and he can throw power, especially defending guys' takedowns, I think this is one of those really black and white fights for Matt Frevola, where he could look really good until he doesn't, and that's what makes this fight really difficult to predict.
For Azaitar, 2 fights in the UFC, the one against Teemu Packalén, the one against Worthy, both guys no longer with the promotion, but regardless, 2 first-round knockouts, 2 performance bonuses. Craziest part, though, over a 2-year layoff for Azaitar. He hasn't fought more than once a year since 2017. So A lot of inactivity for Azaitar, 32 years old right now. This is the part that you didn't see at the start of the video when we threw it back to the old studio about 2 years ago. First time this fight was booked, Azaitar was a minus 160 favorite. That's a 61.5% implied percentage. And if you look at it, 90% of 829 Tapology voters had Azaitar to win.
Really?
Since that time, Frevola's lost twice to Arman Tsarukyan, Terrence McKinney, and he beat Renato Valdez. So it's kind of all over the map. We look at the odds today. Frevola open plus 105, minus 117 is the favorite. Azaitar open minus 125, minus 106, the slight underdog. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. So 90% the first time had Azaitar.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they were that high.
The odds have flipped. And again, we both had Azaitar to beat Frevola the first time. I'm going to say over-under 70% Frevola, and I think it's a little bit Benito Lopez, Mario Bautista.
I think it's going to be under.
You think it's going to be under 70%? It's
way under.
Who are these people? 933 total votes, 88% Azaitar, 85% by knockout for the 12% that are Frevola, 46% by decision, and 29% who only saw him fight Renato Valdez by knockout. So, Matt, the fans have Azaitar, the odds have Frevola. We had Azaitar the first time, but he hasn't fought since before Potato Gate. So who do you have this weekend?
I don't love the fact that I'm still picking Ottman, but I am still picking him in this matchup. I just think with Frevola, he could win every minute of this fight until minute 14, 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden he gets hit by a really big shot and goes down. It's not that I don't like the skill set out of Frevola. It's just when you have these wrestlers who are so dominant with their wrestling, but they don't have the highest probability to finish, and you match that along with the fact that Matt Frevola is not the most durable guy in the world, I think it does leave an area where Ottman can look really bad early on, kind of suffer some of those mistakes, get some of that ring rust off him, and then look good later on in the fight. Or he go out there and get another first-round knockout like he's been able to do in the UFC up until this point. I don't love the pick because, again, I think there's a world where Frevola goes out there, really uses his wrestling and his pace, especially matched along with the wrestling, to have a lot of success against Ottman, but I am still going to pick Azaitar in this fight.
I think Azaitar has a good camp and a good foundation as far as defending the takedowns, working the striking. You look at it, less than a handful of his wins are by knockout after round number 1. Majority are in round number 1. And if you consider it with his brother, long periods of inactivity, fights Marc-Andre Barrio. At the start looks good, and then his cardio fell off a cliff. Now his brother is older, but at the same time, you know, not all brothers are the same. So I guess I do still have Ottman Azaitar in this one. Over the 2 years, Frevola losing the 2 fights, beating Renato Valdez hasn't changed my mind all that much, but we could see a level up from Frevola, especially after that last win. And for Azaitar, we'll see if the ring rust still progresses. Matt, we're going with the underdog in the matchup. Both of us going with Azaitar to get the win. Really eager to hear your thoughts on this one down below in the comments section, especially with the Potato Gate. Really eager to see the rest of the fights on this card. It's an absolute banger. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.